Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first lecture on how to write a machine learning research paper. Today, we will be looking at the high-level structure of 3 machine learning research papers, and then identify the similarities in these sections. And at the end, we will come up with a structure or template of a typical machine learning research paper. So we start off with 3 papers. The first is Barlow Twins, which was published in ICML 2021. And the second is Residual Attention, which was in ICCV 2021. And the final one is Masked Supervised Learning, which was published in BMVC 2022. The main sections in these papers are the abstract, introduction, method, results, related work, and conclusion. Related work is sometimes, or in most cases, after the introduction in a new section itself, or sometimes added after the results section. The similarities between these 3 papers are that they have roughly 6 to 7 main sections, including the abstract. And all papers have the abstract, introduction, and a conclusion, with the related works section sometimes within the introduction or as a separate section itself. And the method section always comes after the introduction section. And finally, the experiments comes after the method section. What are the main illustrations, like figures or tables? So for the first paper, they start off with a method overview, which gives an idea of the entire method in a single figure with the different components and how they work. They also have the pseudocode and then the comparison with other methods on one task. And they also add another comparison with other methods on another task. They also show the comparison of ablations with few different tasks, and they end with a comparison of effect of parameters. So these captions or points that I've written here are actually on the main paper itself in the form of a figure or a table. So for the second and third paper, we could also see a similar trend where they have the overview diagram with or without the different components zoomed in. And also we have the comparison with the different methods on different tasks. We also have the visualization of predictions and the comparison to ablations and other additional results as well. In terms of similarities, they have roughly 10 to 15 figures or tables. So this is within the main paper itself and not the supplementary material. And they always tend to start off with a method overview diagram. And it can also have low-level illustrations of how the method works itself or the different components inside those methods in additional figures. And then they also show the results comparing different methods across different tasks. So here it will be like one figure or one table for a single task. And afterwards, they also have the results comparing method ablations, followed by the examples of input and output predicted by the model. What is the structure of the method section? So for the first one, we can see that they start off with a description of the overall approach, followed by a pseudocode of the approach, and then they describe the architecture, followed by the loss function. For the second paper, they start off with the motivation first, and then they describe the approach, hinting at the different components. Afterwards, they discuss the input to the output for these different components and the loss function that is used to train these models. For the third one, they start off with a description of the overall approach, hinting at the different components. And then they explain these different components by describing the flow of the input to the output and then finally describing the loss functions. In the case of the method section, all papers have relatively similar structure. In some cases, you would find some details in the method or the experiment section, but the method section always has the description of the overall approach, the architecture, the flow of input to the output, and the loss function that goes in. What is the structure of the experiments? For the first paper, we can see that they start with the overall experiment setup. They discuss the data sets, and for each task type, they discuss the results, followed by the ablation and additional results. For the second paper, they start off again with the overall experiment setup, followed by the implementation details and metrics. And for each task, what are the results obtained? And finally, they discuss the ablation experiments and additional results. The third paper at first describes the overall experimental setup, and then they describe the datasets, baselines, metrics, and also points to the supplementary material for implementation detail. And for each task, what are the results obtained? This is then followed by the ablation experiments and results with additional analysis. So all these papers basically describe the overall experiment setup, the datasets, baselines, and metrics. They also discuss the results achieved for different tasks. And then they also have the ablations, where they tend to test each component of their method in isolation. This is basically to highlight that what is the contribution of each component that it has on the entire method itself. Now, if we combine these three papers to come up with a high-level template, this is what it would look like, where we first start off with an abstract and then the introduction, followed by the related work section. And afterwards, we have the method section, where we would basically talk about our proposed work, followed by the experiments, and finally ending with a conclusion. That's it for the first lecture, and on the next one, we will be taking a closer look at each of those sections to understand what actually goes in and how to write these different sections.